All right, good morning. How is everybody? Good, good. Welcome back to class. We are now a little bit into Second Peter. Um, Second Peter talking about false teachers, talking about the apostasy that they were dealing with there at this time, and the difficulties that was causing these people, causing some of them to err from the truth and fall away from the truth, and the difficulties and the destruction that false teaching always causes. And Peter teaching us there that the cure to false teaching is to grow, and to grow in the knowledge of Jesus Christ and His Word. And that's what we see there in 2 Peter. When we finished off on Wednesday night, we were talking about some of these Christian graces, some of these Christian characteristics that Peter is telling us that we need to be growing in. And so that's kind of where we'll pick up this morning, finishing off that list and moving on. Matt, do you care to lead us in a word of prayer? Amen. Thank you. Somebody would start us off. Let's read 2 Peter 1, 3 through 10. 2 Peter 1, 3 through 10. Okay, so as we were talking about this list, we talked that there were a couple different ways to look at it. And I think, for the younger Christian, for the one that is growing, this list of Christian graces that Sam read there, these Christian characteristics that we need to be growing and learning in, kind of a stepping stone, right? We need to you start kind of down here with faith, and you kind of build on every one as we go through that list, and we'll review that list in a second. But for the mature Christian, it's kind of more of a circular thing. We're just kind of looking at it as, these are the things we need to work on. These are the things we need to continue to grow on. And so we looked at, obviously, at the first one is add your faith, virtue. This idea of moral excellency, this idea of being a proper person, this idea of having the right character. And then we're going to add to that knowledge. Continuing to grow and to know more. And then add self-control or temperance. And I think the one that we got to Wednesday night was add to your self-control steadfastness or perseverance. What do you think is meant here by perseverance? What is perseverance? I think it's this idea of enduring under pressure. Right? This is something that's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's just not going to come easy. But I'm going to endure through it. Right? I'm going to put forth that effort. I'm going to try to get through this. I know the challenges are difficult. It's going to be very hard. But I'm going to endure. I think it also means don't slow down. Don't take your foot off the pedal. As you get older, Don't start allowing sin to take hold in your life. Don't lose faith. This is a race. I mean, this is endurance. This is long. This is going to be long lasting. We're to persevere. When can we retire from being a Christian? When does that retirement age come? Death. Yeah, it never comes. There is no retiring. There is no ending. There is no less. There's none of that. We continue to grow. We continue to mature. We continue to persevere. We continue to move on. Keep going. This is something we continue forever. So what are some ways that kind of help with this? How do we help? Well, I think one way is to be amongst like-minded people. To have relationships with people who have similar interests as we do. Obviously, our relationships here with our brethren, coming to church, being a part of the work here, being a part of this group, continuing in Bible study, continue to grow, as Peter would say here. Continue to grow, continue to know more. How do you persevere? It's kind of the way you do that. Having these like-minded interests with people. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly health issues that, right, right, yeah. Yeah, there are certain restrictions in the health realm for that. I think that's very true. Um, I do think it's interesting to note here, if you kind of take the progression definition of these qualities that we've looked at, patience isn't something that comes early in that list, right? Patience kind of comes a pretty good ways into this list. We're almost done with this list now. I think it's kind of interesting about what Peter is trying to say here about patience. This is something that is not something that is built on right in the beginning of your life. Patience is something that is hard to build, that is difficult to develop in your life. And certainly we've got to do it, and we've got to work on it. But I do think it's interesting where in the location of this list it is, because it is difficult. It's something that comes later. True. Very true. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Yeah, the life itself brings on the teaching of patience, right? For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. It is one of those things that is very difficult to find in people. And something we need to be working on, for sure. So the next one is, add your perseverance, godliness. What is kind of meant by godliness? What are we talking about when we're talking about godliness? It's a pretty great word. It's a pretty amazing word there. To be of a godly person. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we see reverence, we see holy, we see holiness. If you remember back when we studied in First Peter, he said the words, "Be holy as I am holy." It's kind of living your life on this earth with the reverent fear of God, right? Having a fear of God, living your life with God in mind. Always living your life with God in mind. What would God have me to do? What would God have me to say? And once again, if we're looking at kind of the progression here, remember we're adding to these qualities one by one. Kind of like Sam said, you've got to have all of these qualities to get to godliness, right? All these other things, you have to have those first to be a godly person. That's kind of what he's building up to there, to be a godly life. It's hard to say that I'm living a godly life if I'm not a virtuous person, or to say I'm living a godly life if I'm not somebody who is persevering in my life, somebody who's trying to get through every day, worshiping God and following Him and doing what we need to be doing. Well, I mean, to have a godly life, you're going to have all those things. So, being godly. And then add to godliness, brotherly affection or kindness. So what is meant here by brotherly affection or kindness? I think it's certainly talking about more than just friendship, more than just a regular friendship. It's a little more attached than that. It's a little more than that. I think. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it is a genuine care, is a genuine love for the people of God. Right? I mean, that is brotherly kindness. It is moving our thoughts away from this world, moving our thoughts out of this world, getting our head out of this world, and aligning ourselves with people of God. I mean, not to say we don't have influence in the world. Of course we want to have influence in the world. We want that. We want to convert people of the world. If I got my preference, man, I'm going to gravitate towards the people of God. And it's kind of the mindset I'm going to have. It's kind of the people I want to be around. People doing the same thing that I'm doing. People wanting to attain the same thing that I want to attain. And people persevering and enduring to get there and to do that. And to have a brotherly love for them. Be a part of them. Let's look at Galatians 6 and verse 10. Somebody would read that, Galatians 6:10. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we should be good to everyone we come in contact with. No doubt about that. But our intensity toward our brethren needs to be different. It needs to be real. We're not going through the act. We are being kind to them. We are showing brotherly love to them. We want to be with them. And that's very powerful. There's unification in that. There's bonding to that. There's unity in that. Talk about that a lot here. And I think we see examples here in Scripture of they were constantly looking out for one another. I think that's what you see in brotherly love and brotherly affection. Just constantly looking out for one another, being there for one another, wanting to be involved with one another in each other's lives. Absolutely, and that's very difficult for some people. Yeah, very difficult, but I think you're right. We have to develop and cultivate those relationships to make that happen for sure. Mm-hmm. Add your brotherly affection, love. Certainly, love is kind of the culmination of this whole list. Right? I mean, that is the ultimate. The Greek word here that is used for love is which one? Y'all know this one. What is the Greek word? Agape love, absolutely. And what is different about agape love that we know, that we've studied? Okay. Absolutely. It is a sacrificial love, right? It is what you said. It is putting others first. Certainly it's affection, it's benevolence, but it's putting the interest of others, it's putting the interest of the kingdom um, above all, um, above what I want, above my self-interest. It is putting everything else first. It is putting the kingdom of God first. It is loving your enemies. Um, it is all the things that God has asked us to do. It is a very mature love. I mean, this is truly the culmination of these stepping stones of this list. In the end, my love for my brother and the church and the work that needs to be done is going to be the ultimate of my priorities and how I live my life. You have thoughts on love? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great point. Love is the ultimate, for sure. So he goes on here to say, if you keep these things, not only will you be filled with the character of God, he says, but you will be effective. He says you will be effective. You will be fruitful. He even says you'll be fruitful for the Lord in everything you do. Why is it so important to be fruitful? Certainly Jesus taught the need to be fruitful, and he condemned people for their lack of fruitfulness. So let's look at John chapter 15. Turn to John chapter 15. Somebody read 2 through 6. John 15, 2 through 6. So I mean, we see here a pretty rough conclusion for those who are not fruitful, for those who are not working on these characteristics, who are not working to grow in them, whether it be you've reached some kind of level with these and you're working to grow each and every one of them, or whether it is you're starting at faith and you're working on your virtue and you're moving up this list, whatever it is. If you're not growing in these things, if you're not trying to be better and grow, then you're not going to be fruitful. And if you're not fruitful, Jesus says that you don't have a part with me, and that you're not a part with me. Being fruitful is essential to our work as Christians and to being with Jesus. So I think Peter says that here, that's a part of it. Continue to grow. Continue working on these things. Bear your fruit, and you'll be considered. It'll be a good thing. You're fine. You're Right, absolutely. I mean, he does make that point there that if you're doing this, you're never going to fall. And certainly people take that and take it out of context and take it to mean all kinds of things. But what's he saying? You're never going to fall. He's saying if you're continually growing in these things, you're continually growing spiritually, you're growing in godliness and everything else, and you're showing fruit and you're bearing fruit. I mean, if you're continually doing that, I mean, there's no room to fall, right? If you continue working on those things, there's nowhere to fall to. You're continuing to be everything you can be as a Christian. And that's such a completely different concept of just once saved, always saved. I've become a Christian. Now I'll just do whatever I want and I'll be fine. Yeah, it's two completely opposite teachings there, for sure. I think you pointed that out very good. Thank you. He also says there in verse 9 that if we lack these qualities and we are not increasing in them, we're not growing in them, that we are so nearsighted that we can't see what God has done for us. And maybe if you're somebody who wears glasses, this illustration means a little more to you. It's impossible to see. Peter is saying here, if you lack these qualities, you do not see Jesus. You just don't see him. You're blind to him. How can that be? How can we get so blind to this that we cannot see what Jesus has done and what he's done for us? It's such a hard thing for me to wrap my head around, that we become that blind to it. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Absolutely. No, that's a great point. I mean, if we understand what Jesus has truly done for us, what he has really done for us, I mean, we'll do whatever he says, right? No questions asked. And people don't do that. People have a very hard-hearted, very straight, I've got this in my mind, and then this is just how it is. Jesus says, if you love me, you know me, you're going to do what I say. That's a very great point. Yeah, and I think that goes very well along with what we're studying here in 2 Peter. I mean, these false teachers were coming in and having some effect, obviously. Well, why were they able to have effect? Because their knowledge and their studying wasn't where it needed to be. I mean, clearly. For sure. It was that way back then. It's that way today. People are not doing the work themselves. And, this list that Peter has given us, that is for the individual person. That's for each individual person to be working on. This is not for somebody to do for me. This is for me. I need to grow in virtue. I need to grow in knowledge. I need to grow in patience. I need to grow in godliness. I need to be the one doing these things for me so that I can be what Christ needs me to be and do the things he wants me to do. I think those are great points. I think another one is that we just become consumed with this world. We just love this world. We love the things in it. We enjoy the things in it. It means more to us, whether it's material things or other relationships or whatever. Just the love of this world just kind of consumes us, and we become blind to Jesus and his teachings and the things that he's asked us to do. I think that's three great points there of how we become blind to Jesus. Verse 10. Talk about this a little bit. It'll also be a confirmation of your calling and who you are as the elect of God. We talked about never falling. I don't think we have to get back into that. But Peter does make a big deal of that. And what an important thing that is to keep this up. You kind of hear people sometimes say, this is just the way I am. This is the way that God made me. You just get what you get. Right? With me, I mean, this is just the culmination of who I am and what I've become. And, if I want to go do something on Friday night, I'll just go do it. Whatever, God will forgive me. It'll be fine. For following this list, for doing these things, then sin is just not going to be a part of who we are. We're not going to give in. We're not going to be pursuing sin. We're just going to continue to grow in this. And what I think we need to be seeing here, that's what I hope we're seeing here, is that we need to be changing. We need to be a people who are changing. We need to be a people who are growing, right? We better be growing in these qualities. We better be making sure that these qualities are a part of our life. And Peter is saying here, you can do that. You can change. You can grow. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's going to come natural. Doesn't mean it's not going to take hours of study and learning. But you can grow in these things. And it may be that you have to go back to the very first one and work on your faith. And then work on your virtue a little bit. And just keep moving up that list. However you got to do it, you got to do it. Because verse 80 says that these things need to be you and they need to be increasing. We got to be growing. We got to be doing more, increasing in these things. I think that is kind of the culmination of the teaching of that list. Continue to grow in that list. So that kind of concludes through verse 10. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts on that? 10 and 11. I think we're going to pick up in verse 12. So if somebody would read verses 12 through 21. 12 through 21. So what do you see here as something that really sticks out from this reading about Peter? You see something kind of that Peter's realizing here about himself. His time is short. I think Peter realizes very much his time is short. Somehow, some way, Jesus has made that clear to him. I think that's very obvious from these verses. And even if Jesus hadn't made it clear, kind of what do we know is going on in the world right now that would make him realize that his time is probably short? I think we talked about this a little bit. We talked about, this great persecution, right? About Rome, about the difficult things that are coming. And, knowing Rome, they probably knew, if we could get rid of Peter and Paul, that'd be a pretty big blow to this Christian movement that's coming along here. We could really put an end to that. Let's look at John 21. John 21. Somebody read verses 18 and 19. So when you know where you go, where you don't want to go, you'll know that it is time for your death. I think Peter was saying here that he was being taken places he didn't want to go, but that it was time. And I think you clearly see that in the reading here that Jesus made it clear to him. I think he knew by the events that were going on around him, what was going on in his life and what was going on kind of with Christianity and everything. I think he definitely had no doubt that his time was short on this earth, for sure. Right. Very rough. It's very rough. It's very rough. Very rough. So how do we treat somebody, somebody we know that's near the end of their life, maybe they're on their deathbed and they're wanting to share some words with us. How do we treat those words? Life lesson. Yeah, we listen intently, right? I mean, here's somebody who's lived at the culmination of their life. I mean, this is somebody who hopefully is full of knowledge and wisdom, and they're wanting to share some of that with us, and we should be ready to listen closely to what they have to say. I think it's interesting what you see from Peter in this section. In verse 12, he says, I'm here to remind you, right? I'm here to remind you. Verse 13, I'm here to stir you up. Verse 14, I'm putting off my body. And so in verse 15, I'm going to make every effort so that you are able to recall these things. So what I think you see here in this man, Peter, is that he's convicted. He's on a mission, right? I mean, he's convicted, he's on a mission, and he wants to make sure that the Christians remember these messages that he is giving them and that he's saying. And so I think through verse 15, we see kind of this admonition of Peter. I want to stir you up. I want you to remember this. And not only do I want you to remember this, I want you to be increasing in these things and growing and learning. And he tells us here that we need reminders, right? We need reminders. How do the elders help us with reminders? We are constantly growing, constantly learning. We need to be reminded oftentimes of the things that we have learned. How do the elders assist with that? Okay, elders teach us kind of what we need to do. Absolutely. What about the evangelist? How does he help in that? Right. Absolutely. What about uh, what about our fellow Christians? How do they help us with reminders? Okay, how to act godly, how to act righteously. I mean, hopefully they are. Hopefully we're all growing and we're trying to live our lives and by example and by being around each other and coming together. You know, we're learning how to be godly and act righteously and reminded of those things and how to do those things. Very true. Yeah, Peter never misses a beat for sure. Yeah, exactly. What a great example. He's always ready to teach. He's always ready to go and do something. That is Peter for sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. That is great. So if we take this personally, and I think that's what's so powerful about the New Testament so often. They're so personal. I mean, sure, we can read the Old Testament. Those are important. We'll never downplay that. We can learn a lot from the Old Testament. But man, so many of these letters in the New Testament, they're so personal. They're so things we need to know and to understand and to learn and to grow in. They speak to us and they apply to the life that we're living today, right? The things we're facing today. You know, Peter's addressing those things. I mean, obviously, First Peter, we have persecution today. Not like they were facing all the time, but certainly a first persecution. Second Peter, false teachers. False teachers are everywhere, right? I mean, they are everywhere. How do we deal with false teachers? Peter is explaining that here. It's so personal. It's so applicable to us. And Peter's saying that he's going to clarify and justify the power in these words. That's so important for us to understand. Verse 16. It's a very powerful statement here about how we got God's Word. How did they get it? What is Peter saying here about how they came up with the words that he's writing here? He saw it, yeah. This is not made up, right? This isn't something he just made up. This is not a myth. It's not a fable. This is not just man's thought that he had. This came directly from the Holy Spirit. And how many years here approximately are we from Christ's death, burial, and resurrection? 33, around 30, 33. Yeah, I think that's right. And already, people are trying to say that what? Already, 30 years after it, people are trying to say, what about that? About Christ's burial, death, and resurrection? Yeah, exactly. It never happened. Made up. Don't know what you're talking about. Didn't see it. Don't know what's going on. It's just a con. There's no way Peter saw that. Crazy. Does this still happen today? Well, of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, if it was happening 30 years after it happened, imagine all this many years now. Of course it's happening. Just crazy that it was going on already that soon, that Peter was having to deal with that soon after it happened. Just wild. I think there's also an interesting point here, the mention of the coming of Jesus Is this the first coming or the second coming of Jesus that he's talking about here? And I would offer to you that the translated word there for coming is parousia, P-A-R-O-U-S-I-A, parousia, the second, and that is translated that it is just another term for the second coming. So I think by that translation, he's very clearly talking about the second coming here. So is this idea of Jesus coming again, of him coming back, that was being doubted here as well at this time? So they were already going to these people, and they were already saying that none of this was true. None of this was true. And because of that, Christ is not coming back. None of this is going to happen. So Peter is going to deflect that, and he's going to say, well, that's not so. And he gives us three different evidences for why that's not so. And in verse 16, he says it's not so because we saw it. Right? We were eyewitnesses. We saw Jesus. We saw him after he was resurrected. So Peter's first eyewitness is that he saw it. He directly saw it. That is Peter. The second one is, in verse 17 and 18, is that he heard it. Right? They heard Jesus speak. They heard God speak. Sam referenced this just a minute ago, talking about the transfiguration. That's the moment that's kind of being talked about here in verse 17 and 18. It's talking about that they were up on the mountain in the transfiguration. And I think in Peter's mind that is proof that Jesus was coming back, was that he was there. We will conclude there. We will pick up there Wednesday night. Thank you all very much for your comments and for everything in class. Really good. Thank you. See you Wednesday.